Thank you for your patience and welcome to the Policy Committee meeting of February 13th. I would like to again welcome our student representative, Joanna Vines, our teacher representative, Andrea McMenamin, our vice chair, Chuck Madden. Andrew Babson will be joining us shortly, board member Susan Stern, our administrative liaison, Dr. Rabarchek, and I also want to welcome our solicitor, Ed Diazio, to the table tonight. So welcome everyone, and let's get started. Can we please go through some administrative remarks? Dr. Rabarchek.
Sure, welcome everybody. I have one question from the last policy meeting from January 9th, and it was, will the booster policy address impacts of Title IX? And yes, it will have language that is referring to Title IX in that policy once that is developed. In regards to our policies being presented tonight, we have two, Policy 251, homeless students, and 810, transportation. So for those of you that viewed or downloaded documents from board docs prior to Sunday evening, an updated version, which is available on the side table. The most recent revisions include new information regarding the dispute resolution process in homeless students, and administration will be recommending that this be moved to the February regular business meeting agenda for first read. The second agenda item we'll be reviewing tonight is Policy 810, transportation. Again, those who viewed or downloaded documents from board docs prior to Sunday evening, they have a red line and a clean policy in its original form. That document has since been reduced and shortened to be a policy and an AR that we will be reviewing tonight, and again available at the side table. The purpose was that to streamline the policy that authorizes the board to provide transportation to students and then put the guidelines to be followed that are followed in an outline within the AR.
Of Wirecast.
I will also be presenting a revised timeline for the development of the Booster Club policy. The purpose of this is that we want to make sure that we are purposeful as we move forward the development of this policy. And there were changes that were brought through recommendations of our administration as well as the board. And we will be looking to continue to refine that timeline if necessary in order to conduct a thorough review of policies as well as developing our own policy and eventually producing an AR. As also part of my administrative remarks this evening, I just want to bring to your attention Policy 206, assignments within the district. This has an accompanying AR that addresses classroom placement of twins, higher order multiples, and it recently recognized this AR as missing pertinent information relating to attendance boundaries and criteria for student assignments, both of which are relevant to the revisions of Policy 810, transportation, and Policy 251, homeless students, which we are looking at this evening. Further development of that AR will be constructed to support analysis of the elementary enrollment and billing capacity review that's being conducted in conjunction with the Facilities Committee. And then a final note just from Mr. Petit, our Communications Director. He wanted to let the committee know that he will be providing a quick update in next week's Government Relations and Communications Committee regarding the status of the Communications Policy Administrative Regulation. As you'll recall, the district and the board passed a new communications policy last June. The development of the AR has been delayed a bit due to ongoing projects in the district that impact the AR's content.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Rabarchek, for bringing us up to speed on all of those relevant issues. I did want to just make a quick note before we get into public comment and the approval of minutes that we are going to switch the order of the agenda a teeny bit in that we will be discussing 810, our transportation policy, first for a very specific reason, and that is going to be a model we might want to use for Policy 251 because it has been abbreviated as a policy and we've moved much of the content into an AR. And as you look at 251, it's possible we might want to take that same direction for that policy. So that's why we're going to switch. So we look at the one in that form first. With that said, let's move to public comment.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Is there any public comment? Welcome, Mrs. Spurtle.
Thank you, Ms. Goldman. Good evening, Cindy Spurl, Wayne. I have one comment on what was on the agenda, then I have another comment to make on policy. Just a question, and I'm sure Dr. Barczyk will be going over it.
This is
On
a demonstration
what
of
exactly
Wirecast.
was revised on the Booster Club timeline. And the timeline, since we're into almost the middle of February, have the tasks that you've set up and completed to date, as far as January and February go on the timeline. And then I have a comment on questions, I guess, on policy, and that pertains to
This
the
is a
January
demonstration
board
of
business
Wirecast.
meeting. And my question is exactly what policy was followed that allows the board president to attack a board member in public and ask that board member to resign. What policy was followed that directed that board president to go to our solicitor, the district solicitor, and have him go after the board member in public? Was there a board vote to proceed in that direction? And then
This
was
is a
there a board
demonstration
vote to
of
hire an
Wirecast.
outside solicitor to handle this matter? And one other comment on that meeting, the policy, at least the policy that I found, which is board governance standards / code of conduct for the board, which is policy number 001. I couldn't find anything that directed the president to do what was done in the January meeting and how the meeting was conducted. I did find two interesting items that say
This is a demonstration of
responsibility
Wirecast.
of governance and leadership of the board is to work together in a spirit of harmony and cooperation, and to operate as a collective board in making decisions. So I think both of those address some of the questions that I have. And also just a comment that not allowing Ms. Bonenberger to respond to the allegations that were brought up at the very beginning of the meeting until the end of the meeting, which was an hour and a half later, is unconscionable.
This is a demonstration of
Okay, thank you for
Wirecast.
those comments. I assume, seeing no one else here, that we've concluded that first public comment, and we'll move into the approval of minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? I know I have one correction in that Joanna Vines, under introductions and administrative remarks, it says Joanne Vines as opposed to Joanna, so not, it's been changed. Okay, okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking at an old copy of minutes. So
This
I
is a
apologize.
demonstration of Wirecast.
So other than that though, I think we're good. Are we good? Everybody else?
That's good.
Okay, terrific. And let's move into our first agenda item, which, as I said, will now be policy 810, transportation.
Okay, so as noted in administrative remarks, the documents that were posted on Board Docs prior to Sunday evening was the transportation policy that was broken down into both the policy and an AR. So the language that's within the original document that was posted prior to Sunday has all the same language. It was just separated out to put into both a policy and AR. So from that point, I'll introduce, we have the proposed clean version of policy 810 that basically shares the information within the policy that gives the board the authority to provide transportation to students within our district. We did retain the guidelines for
This
video
is a
cameras within
demonstration
the
of
policy itself,
Wirecast.
as there are authorizations that need to be included for that piece. And then all the other components that required background checks for crime reporting, the regulations regarding diesel-powered vehicles, reporting accidents, bus conduct, and so on, are now all included within the policy, or the AR that you will find within the agenda, the packet. So I'll take any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you.
This
So let's
is a
start
demonstration
with,
of
over here
Wirecast.
with Mrs. Stern, do you have some comments? I just want to, for the benefit of the committee, just remind everybody that it's the board's responsibility to review and approve policies. ARs typically are not really our charge. Those are up to the discretion of the administration. We are looking at this AR. Sometimes there's an exception made, and in this case, we've been presented with the AR because it has been separated out from what you initially got, which was one gigantic policy. But just
This is a
for,
demonstration of
particularly,
Wirecast.
Mr. Babson and perhaps Joanna's benefit, since you're newer to the committee, that the ARs are not something typically that we will be charged with review. But that's why we're seeing those tonight.
Correct.
Okay, so Mrs. Stern, would you like to start with your comments?
Yes, thank you. So I think the first question I'm going to direct, mostly I need to direct this to Ed, because I understand the purpose of having a policy versus an AR. At least my understanding of it is that our policies provide for the authorities, kind of state out the authority of what we can and can't do and what we must do. So in that vein, I am curious, well, I'm curious about two things. Number 7 of the students who are entitled to have transportation, where it says homeless students, which I would capitalize the S since in a different policy we have defined homeless students. Or if you want to say homeless students as defined in, cross-reference on the side.
This is a
251.
demonstration of
Maybe
Wirecast.
actually, that's probably a better way to do it, is 251 on the side. But students placed in foster care. Does that mean students who are placed for foster care with families who live within our district, or students who lived in the district and are then placed in foster care? And maybe that question is going to be answered by 251, because there was some provision about foster care, but I think it got redlined out in terms of the categories of homeless students.
Mr. Diazio, I just want to remind you, your mic is off.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Yes, thanks.
The foster
What you
care
have to say
students.
is very important. We want your mic on.
The foster care students that are referred to here are those that are placed by children and youth in the district.
Into the district.
Correct.
So if we have a student who was in our district, who is then placed in foster care in another district, do they now, I saw foster care students crossed out of the homeless students in 251, and maybe I'll circle back around to this then, but it's kind of
This
two
is
sides
a
of the same
demonstration
coin.
of
The student
Wirecast.
is our student and then is placed in foster care outside of our district. What happens to their education?
We have an MOU with children and youth that dictates transportation. Sometimes it's a shared responsibility between the educating school district and the school district of origin. Sometimes one school district will assume that responsibility.
Okay, great, thank you. The other piece that I saw taken out of the policy that I was a little bit surprised about is
This is a
providing
demonstration of
for
Wirecast.
the guideline that field trips shall be provided in accordance with board policy and applicable law. I would have imagined that under the guidelines, we would have listed the guidelines about video cameras, and I would have imagined that in the policy, we also would have referenced that transportation of students on field trips will be provided in accordance with the board policy 121 and applicable law. So I thought that piece
This is a
should have been left in
demonstration
the
of
policy.
Wirecast.
And likewise, I thought that, I did think that, there was another piece of it, I think it had to do with the school bus drivers. Just making the guideline that school bus drivers shall not be employed or contracted until they've complied with the mandatory background check, blah, blah, blah. Not the whole thing, just kind of that beginning paragraph that sets the stage to provide for it in policy that these things must occur, and then the details
This
of
is
how
a
they're
demonstration
conducted
of
are spelled out
Wirecast.
in the AR. And there may have been a third thing, oh, yes, I'm sorry. This specifically, because it's cross-referenced with policy 718, under reporting accidents. I would have thought that the guideline just saying all accidents involving the school bus shall be immediately reported by the driver, and that they must immediately contact the supervisor or his or her designee, and that school bus drivers will not allow any firearms, blah, 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 on the bus, which is cross-referenced by
This is
policy
a demonstration of
718.
Wirecast.
Now, again, there's a whole lot of extra information under each of those situations that I think could go into the AR, but I'm just kind of wondering why those high-level rules, if you will, are not staying in the policy? And if you have an answer, great. If they belong back in the policy, great, but I just wonder which it is.
I think there's a good argument that those specific provisions that you pointed out could be retained in the policy. And I think there's clearly statements
This
that
is
are
a demonstration
clearly
of
policy, there's
Wirecast.
statements that are clearly administrative regulation, and then you have some that you probably could put in either bucket. And I agree that those three that you pointed out, if there's a preference to retain those in the policy, I think logically that makes sense.
The other thing was, I'm not sure if we would be required to leave in the following two things under operations. One is that something about non-public schools being entitled to their transportation, but that they have to.
This is a demonstration
You know,
of Wirecast.
there's a little blurb about that. And the policy part on the last part that says, in keeping with the regulations of PDE, district-owned vehicles will not be used commercially or for other district-authorized services, or for anything other than district-authorized services. So, because that stuff was all in the original policy, and then we are moving largely toward the notion of ARs, which spell out the
This is a
details of
demonstration
how we're
of
going to do
Wirecast.
things. I still thought that the basic premise of policy is to dictate what we are and are not responsible for. And I think that in this context, there's a few high-level things that I think we need to provide for in the policy, and then spell out more, in much more detail, which is fine, in the AR.
Okay, before we move on, Susan, can you just quickly, let's recap and make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure.
With what we're taking from the administrative regulation.
I'm asking the question, I want to hear Ed's thought
This is a
on in that
demonstration
Yeah, let's
of
just
vein.
make sure we're
Wirecast.
recapped and clear, because if we're gonna move this to a first read at the end of the month, let's just make
Okay.
sure that we are presenting the right documents. So let's
Okay,
recap.
so under guidelines, when I look back at the original policy and all the things that were in there,
Do we have the ability to put this up?
I have no idea. I didn't think we could click on it.
I mean, it would be easier than trying to flip.
I
it
guess I
down
would say the
and
red
go
line, if
to
you
the
click
bar.
on the red line up there, or even the clean line, the new version of clean line 810.
This one
This
here.
is a
No, because that
demonstration
has
of
yours.
Wirecast.
Maybe the AR, there's some stuff in the AR, this is where I'm pulling it from. Perfect. So, that's
Talking
really
about
great.
Field trips.
Yes, so if you were to go to field trips, that first section there, just the first paragraph of that, with the, by the way, cross-referencing board policy 121 over to the left, because then we can make changes of cross-referencing at a later time. That is something I would have
This
thought,
is
and
a
I welcome Ed's
demonstration of
opinion on this, his
Wirecast.
legal opinion on, does that really belong back in the policy to provide for it, and then we have all of the details of how we're gonna be doing it. The required background checks,
Okay, hold.
okay,
Field trips? Are we
Yes.
going to move that back? Let's
I
just-
think that makes sense.
Okay, let's just make sure it's circled and start, and also I think we talked about numbering pages, so that'll make it easier, I think, going forward, even in ARs, that everything's numbered. And Tony and I also talked about,
This
dating
is a demonstration
ARs.
of
So I just wanna bring
Wirecast.
Ed up to speed, in case you hadn't already covered that, Tony, that everything we do is dated going forward.
Can I
Okay.
ask a question on this? So, the purpose that we used to have for ARs was you could change things without coming back to change policy. So,
Right.
the number of chaperones, that could change.
Correct.
Okay? And we don't want you to have to come back to the board to change that.
Right, or that process clearances, all the components we can
This is a
always go back
demonstration
to.
of Wirecast.
But I mean. for
but Chuck, that's
instance-
already provided for in 121's AR.
Well, what is this AR for then?
This is the AR for transportation.
Transportation.
So I would prefer, just thinking about transportation, than just have it in there. Why are you taking out, we don't know how many chaperones there are. Is there a list someplace of that? How many kids, how many chaperones?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Chuck, what I'm saying
No,
is.
that's what I'm saying.
I understand that, but the reason that I'm saying this belongs back in the
This is
policy
a
for
demonstration of
transportation is to
Wirecast.
say that, to affirm that the district is going to provide transportation for students on field trips, and we're gonna follow policy 121 to do that.
this Chuck, maybe this helps, this doesn't bind us if it goes back into policy, it doesn't bind us to have to
Well,
approve the number of
You have
chaperones.
an AR someplace, you're telling me you have an AR that tells us the number of chaperones for a field trip.
Yes, policy, the AR for 121.
That's
This
in
is a
121.
demonstration of
Specifically in
Wirecast.
121
For the minimum, I'd have to go back and check, but there's a minimum number of chaperones per student.
If it's located someplace that, and it can be changed by the administration without coming back to policy, then I'm fine with it.
Right.
Okay? That's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
Giving you the opportunity to say,
Right.
oh, you know what? It's a different type of a field trip. We don't need the intense chaperones that we would if we were going here or there. It can change.
Sure.
Right.
And I
So-
just want you guys to be able to change it without coming back to us.
Right,
That's all.
so we'll make a note to look
This
into,
is a
have the
demonstration
administration look
of
into
Wirecast.
the AR for 121 and make sure that that is where the number of chaperones can be adjusted, okay? Next.
Yeah, now, as I'm thinking about it, Ed, I don't think the required background checks, because that's actually a piece that's covered under general employment. So if you leave that in AR, background checks are required for general employment, so I don't think it needs to be back in the transportation policy. Okay?
So just field trips so
Field
far.
trips so far. The next piece, the next question I had was,
Reporting
This is
accidents.
a demonstration
yes,
of Wirecast.
I'm sorry, it was reporting accidents, let me just get to that. Yes, is the first paragraph of that, all accidents involving a school bus shall be reported immediately, and it must, regardless of the severity, contact your supervisor. Is that of the level that it should be in the policy or in the AR?
The only thing I would say here is that if the district's ever
This is a
making any changes
demonstration
between
of
how it provides
Wirecast.
for transportation, whether by employees, whether through a contractor, if there's gonna be a different reporting procedure for an accident, that provides a reason to leave it in the AR.
Okay, fine. And then the bus conduct, which cross-references policy 718, which is the reason it stuck out to me, the first paragraph. The school bus driver shall not allow any firearms, explosives, or anything of a dangerous or objectionable nature on the bus. And this is the other part that caught my eye, that service animals are permitted on the
This
bus
is a
in accordance with
demonstration
board
of
policy. I
Wirecast.
think that belongs back in the policy, because we have a whole separate policy about service animals, and we have a whole AR about service animals. But it just really had more to do with, is this the kind of provision that rises to the level of needing to be in the policy versus the AR?
So for firearms and service animals, there's other policies that prohibit firearms and permit service animals under certain conditions.
This is a
I think all
demonstration of
this
Wirecast.
paragraph does is say that the rules that the administration is preparing, we're gonna follow board policy.
Okay.
It's just referring back to another policy.
I'd have to look
These
at
terms
service
don't
animals.
set board policy, it's just
That's
saying
fine.
we're gonna follow board policy.
Okay.
So I think they can stay here.
So I'll double check while we're talking, while somebody else is talking about whether or not our service animals policy provides for transportation, because we worked on service
This
animals
is a
in the last
believe it
year,
does,
so.
but again,
Wirecast.
Yeah, but I'll look while somebody else is speaking.
But we
So,
do need to make sure that those policies are cross-referenced. And in this format, I don't think it is, because we don't have the
do
left-hand
we cross-reference
margin.
ARs? We don't cross-reference.
Generally,
Oh,
we
right,
do
correct.
not.
Yeah, no,
Forgive
no,
me.
we don't
Sorry.
cross-reference
I'm getting
ARs.
confused.
So
Okay.
those were the only ones I had a question about. It sounds like the only one we're really gonna put back in is field trips. Just the beginning of field trips, Amy, to double back.
Right.
Okay, great. That's
Susan, can I clarify two other things though?
Sure.
You brought
This
up
is a
operations, the
demonstration of
non-public school
Wirecast.
piece.
Oh, right,
and
I'm
keeping
sorry.
regulations of TDE with Public Utilities Commission.
Right, now, and what about those two issues?
All right, so I'm looking at operations now. What are we specifically looking at?
Do we need to provide for in the policy that we provide transportation to non-public schools? And then we have some regulations about it in terms of their early dismissals and all of that. And because I don't actually remember seeing in the beginning of the policy of the
This is a
eligible students
demonstration
for
of Wirecast.
transportation.
That's where it should go. So there should be a statement in policy that says
Non-public schools.
non-public schools in accordance with the administrative regulation. And then that's
So
where you
we
can
do
spell
need
it.
to provide for that one back in the policy. All right.
Not the whole paragraph, just adding a
Mhm.
sentence to the policy referencing non-public schools.
Yeah.
It will likely be number 9 under
Okay.
the authority in the policy.
Or, yeah, whatever that
This
is,
is a
yes.
demonstration of
Susan,
Wirecast.
before you go on, I just want to bring to everybody's attention that the documents that were handed out today are a tiny bit different from Sunday's in that under the following forms of activity that are not tolerated, I believe 16 has been added since everybody saw their materials. And that sentence, any conduct in violation of board policy, school rules, or any applicable student code of conduct was added to cover things like our anti-hazing, anti-harassment, etc. Because obviously those
This
forms
is a
of
demonstration of
behavior
Wirecast.
are not tolerated on buses any more than they're tolerated on school property. So if you haven't seen that, know that that is added as number 16.
Okay, and then at the final one was the notion of district-owned vehicles will not be used commercially or for other than district-authorized services and activities. Is that something that needs to be back in the policy? Or is it okay in the AR? It's right under operations, I'm sorry, it continues after that.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
That's really more, actually, that would be more about in our facilities policies, about how our buses can be used. It's not specifically about transportation, correct? In terms of policy.
I would leave 1, 2, and 3 in the AR for sure, about how the cost is calculated, so cost.
Oh,
per
I'm not
mile.
talking about the cost.
You're just talking about that first sentence?
No, I'm talking about the, Tony, in keeping with the regulations.
Regulation, the very first sentence.
Yeah, but there's no 1, 2, or 3 there.
This
I
is a
know.
demonstration of Wirecast.
Mine doesn't look like that.
Yeah. Can we put it up on here so we can all
Yes.
see what we're doing?
The one, oh.
Yes.
I just meant the notion that, just the notion of the sentence, district-owned vehicles will not be used commercially for other than district-authorized services. That's all, that's the only piece I meant.
That's a policy provision.
That's a policy provision.
Okay.
The rest of, I would still leave it all in the AR, but that particular sentence is the only one I meant.
So-
Susan, I think you're correct to make a
This
link
is a
to
demonstration of
facilities. In other words,
Wirecast.
that would seem to link to a broader district policy that district property should only be used for its intended purpose. So there could be.
That may exist in a different
Yeah.
policy, right, it may.
So what is the remedy for that? We're going to lift that sentence, or are we going to add a sentence to policy? What should we?
We'll add the sentence to policy.
So it's gonna stay as is in the AR, but you're going to replicate that first sentence in the
This
policy.
is a
Great,
demonstration of
those are the only questions I
Wirecast.
had about the whole policy,
And
thank
then
you.
to Andrew's point, the possibly cross-referencing it with facilities.
Yep.
So I'll look for that.
Okay, Susan, do you?
Oh, I'm sorry, one final thing. I'm sorry, you found my new piece, they're not numbered, so my papers are in order.
Sorry.
This is something that, okay, safety, economy, and student conduct. The first sentence of that, and my pages aren't numbered, so I am sorry about that.
Mhm.
The first sentence of safety, economy, and student conduct. The board shall review
This
and
is a
approve
demonstration
bus
of
routes for the
Wirecast.
ensuing school year. I gotta tell you, that is not something I've ever done.
I had that as a question too.
And it's in the AR, I don't even know how that would ever,
It was in the original PSBA policy, and I guess it just slipped into this policy, but I agree with you that that is something that had caught my eye too, because we don't approve bus routes to the
Is
best
there
of my.
anything?
So what we'll do is we'll check and see where that requirement
This
came
is a
from.
demonstration
Yes,
of
of
Wirecast.
because I get nervous when I see shall, when the
It is.
language says the board shall do this.
That's what I thought.
So they have to bring due.
I believe Michelle said, that's the thing, Michelle said
They're going to do it in
this had
September,
to be
it's the
in
first
there.
time they have to do it.
Okay, so this is gonna be new board.
Yeah, August.
But I
So
wanna
then
know
that-
where it came from, I wanna make sure.
Separate from that, add back to my question, when it says something that the board has to do, like we shall review and approve bus routes, I think that belongs back in the policy.
This is a
'Cause
demonstration
something,
of
a law or
Wirecast.
something is saying that we now have to do this.
Right.
So I don't think that's an AR mean, you could repeat it in the AR, because a whole bunch of other stuff there, but in terms of one of the things that has to happen, it sounds like, Patty, now it has to happen that the board annually shall review and approve bus routes for the ensuing school year.
So especially since this is new for the upcoming year, we can always go back and put it back into the policy then.
Well, I think it has to be
It is a
in the policy.
requirement.
So
We're gonna check, right.
Okay.
Check the requirement, and
Yep.
if
This
it is,
is a
it
demonstration
goes into
of
the policy.
Wirecast.
That's the remedy
Mhm.
there.
Yep.
Okay, Susan, do you have anything else on transportation?
No, now I found all my pages, so no,
Just
thank
before
you.
we move on to other board members, Ed, are you comfortable with the feedback so far? It's a lot to keep track of. Okay, let's move over to Mr. Babsett. I feel like I'm on a game show. Mr. Babsett, what's your bid?
Is this thing on?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, I'm just referring to the last page of the policy document. So, video cameras and audio recordings, we could call
This
those
is a
what?
demonstration
Supervisory
of
technologies,
Wirecast.
perhaps, for the purposes of disciplinary and security purposes. So, as a father of a kindergartner, a everyday concern is about the whereabouts of buses during unusual weather or perhaps schedule changes. And I'm curious how GPS might fit into this part of our policy on transportation. Would that
This is a
would that fit in
demonstration
here?
of
Again,
Wirecast.
this is the last page.
So currently, right at this point, Mr. Hearn is actually piloting some GPS systems.
Mhm.
So when and if we do decide to go through that route, that would be something I would believe that would be put into this piece or added as a separate piece
Mhm.
into the policy regarding GPS and more specifics to the procedures, how they're used in AR if necessary.
Mhm. Okay, great.
So-
And I suppose that could also link to communication, something with
This
Michael.
is a demonstration
Okay, so
of
there could be a
Wirecast.
situation with snow or inclement weather at some time.
That's accurate because the GPS that's being piloted actually, when I spoke to Mr. Hearn about this, it will present a message to the parent, whether it's delayed or on time, and there's actually a piece of that software that actually a parent could call in and say, my child's not coming to school today, they're sick, and allow the bus to keep continuing in their route without stopping. So I believe all of that would have to be included within communications as well.
Okay, great, so
This
we
is
may
a
be amending the
demonstration
policy
of
again.
Wirecast.
Okay, but hopefully not in the really near future, let's get through this one, a 10-year update. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Mrs. McMenamin, do you have any feedback on the transportation policy? Okay, and Joanna?
I just had a question.
Terrific, bring it on.
So, on the following forms, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, of activity, like the, section.
I'm so glad you're gonna say something.
You can
Why?
move the mic
Okay.
So fast.
So, I had two things. One, why
This
is
is a
electronic
demonstration
device-
of Wirecast.
Thank you. Glad you said it.
That's probably a dated provision, and what that should say is.
It used to say MP3 players, just so you know, we updated it.
That is a thing.
It did.
It used to say Walkman.
Walkmans, yeah, exactly. And also, wasn't gonna bring this up, but I'm really glad you did, Joanna, because I'm also like, I don't like to have rules in place that we're blatantly not going to enforce. I just think it
This is a
reinforces the notion
demonstration
to
of
kids that
Wirecast.
they don't really have to follow rules. I gotta tell you, eating and drinking, like kids eat and drink on the buses. That's sometimes the only chance they get a chance to eat and drink during the day. And electronic devices, I mean, who are we kidding?
Okay, but let's let Joanna, as the student, make
Sorry,
sure
go ahead.
we cover all of the things that, from a student's perspective, are simply unrealistic, maybe, is where you're going with that?
Yeah, just like communicating, 'cause I don't take the bus anymore, but my siblings.
This is a
really do, and
demonstration
just,
of Wirecast.
Being able to text our mom, like, oh, we're like almost at, like, can you pick us up from the bus stop, we're 10 minutes away or something like that, and just like, I don't know, I just don't understand why it was.
That is an
included.
excellent question. So is that the eating and drinking? what
Yes,
is-
well, there's that too, and then also, number 2, smoking. I actually think that vaping is more of an issue than smoking. I mean, you could include that, but then maybe also include vaping.
And this is why we have have students on our
This
This
committees,
is a
you know?
demonstration of
because
Wirecast.
Us old folks, we don't know this stuff, so thank you. So how do we want to respond to that, administration? Do you have any others, by the way?
No.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
With number 2 in the vaping piece, I appreciate that because I didn't think of vaping. That's something that could easily be added. The electronic devices piece, as I do agree with you, because as Ms. Stern said too, is, you know, it's there, it happens. But I would have to look back. There is language within our handbook, especially at the
This
elementary
is a
level, that says
demonstration
that
of
they're not allowed
Wirecast.
on. So it would have to be a elementary, secondary level thing here that I think I would need to look further into how we can state that so it accurately reflects our handbooks and those code of conducts at the elementary.
But this is an AR, so you can make that
I
change
can.
without bringing it back
Yes.
to us.
That's what I'm saying. I just want to look at what type of language I could add to separate those two.
Terrific. And the eating and drinking?
That's what you were saying.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was stuck on electronic devices. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Joanna, for that feedback. And
This is a
Chuck,
demonstration
do you
of
have any
Wirecast.
Transportation comments? Beyond what was said already?
No, I think we're covered pretty much. I just wanted to touch with we're talking about how to locate our buses and things like that. Our buses are in communication with the depot
That's correct.
at this point.
Mhm.
So we do have a system in, it's not a GPS, but we do have a system in place to know where they are at a particular time.
The GPS is more of a student assistance type of.
Gotcha. Yep. I just want to make sure that the general public realizes we do know where our buses are.
Yes, they do.
This
We also
is a
have a system to send
demonstration of
emails by
Wirecast.
Foxglove, too. So, using School Messenger, the same thing we do for calls, we could also do it for just a bus if we needed to let the parents know what's going on.
If a bus is late, they
Yeah,
can
we
just
could.
say out to
We
all
don't,
roads.
yes,
Gotcha.
we could. We have the capabilities in case of emergency to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, if I run through the committee, I have 2 more questions
Sure.
I'd like to pose. One is, the possibility of using the term school vehicle throughout the policy, so that in the interest
This
of
is
being
a
more concise,
demonstration of
we might not
Wirecast.
even need a definition, and we could eliminate a number of words by going back and forth between school bus, school vehicle. Would everybody be in agreement to change this to a uniform school vehicle mentioned term throughout the policy? We have a yay or?
I'm fine with
yay?
that.
Okay, so could we?
This is in the AR or the policy?
No, in the policy.
Policy.
Okay. But I just want to make sure that if, for instance, we're going on a.
This is a
going on
demonstration of
traffic, For
Wirecast.
instance, might be up in East Stroudsburg. They may be eating something on the way, but we'll be able to cover that. That would be a deal. So I'm
School,
thinking out
so,
loud.
okay.
No,
So,
I'm just saying that.
school
you're talking
vehicle
about
covers any
van,
kind of,
cub
yes.
or whatever.
Do
that-
we
that
need to
we're
keep the
using.
definition of what a school vehicle is in the policy, or can we just by using school vehicle, it's understood that it could be a van, it could be a bus, it could be,
This is a demonstration of
tractor. I mean,
I
Wirecast.
wouldn't see the harm in putting in the policy, by school vehicle, we mean da-da-da-da-da.
okay.
And then in the AR, they could always specify.
Okay, so could we amend the definition and then swap out in time for the first read at the end of the month? Make sure every reference is to a school vehicle and nothing else. Would that be okay?
Yes, and we would leave the contract for school bus services though, or school vehicle services, because that, I'm thinking Camp Canadiense, Cindy, their contract
This
is their
is a
charter
demonstration
buses,
of
they're not school
Wirecast.
vehicles. So I would just wanna make sure that we include that language.
You confer with Ed, and whatever you guys
Okay.
decide is fine. The other thing that I had,
Andrea.
oh wait, I have to ask a question.
I think in some cases though, there are vans that teachers drive in certain situations.
That's correct.
So I don't know if that, if you say school vehicles, if that runs into a problem in the AR, because you have school bus drivers.
Yeah, we have school teachers who drive.
Right, you have teachers who
This
drive vans.
is a demonstration
so I don't
of
know
Wirecast.
if
Oh,
they
yeah,
are
that's
the
true.
School bus drivers, and they're not bus drivers, they're staff. I mean, so you do have people that aren't bus drivers that can drive a van of kids.
So maybe this should stay the way it's designed, which is specifically all about the buses.
So if you have that scenario, it would be changed to school vehicle driver. They would still be the individual that's in charge of the bus. The background checks would still apply.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Let's see what else.
Well, you know what, if we don't decide that tonight in the interest of time, could you just make a note to research that
Yeah,
concern?
we'll look and see if it makes
And then
sense.
give us an explanation before we see the next version of the policy, so we know? Would that work? I wanna give you a chance to make that note. I know how hard it is to write and think at the same time, or maybe it's just my personal challenge, but I'll wait till
This
we finish
is a
up so we can
demonstration
send
of
it.
Wirecast.
Good, okay, thank you. And before we wrap up, because I think we're at the end of transportation at this point, we had attached a sample bus stops policy, and I'd like to turn it over to our solicitor to explain why.
So the bus,
I don't have
that
it.
was only the administration component, it wasn't
Right.
posted,
Yeah, we didn't get it.
it was within board docs.
I didn't get it.
Oh, none of the, you just sent it to, wasn't it attached?
Was that in the
to
packet?
Friday's packet?
It was in
Yeah,
the
it's in
packet.
Friday's packet.
The Friday packet.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
So in your packet, you will see stapled at the very end, a sample bus stops policy. And that was because on March 22nd, 2017, when we last met with Mr. Diazio and we were talking about the transportation policy, you had brought up, Mr. Diazio, the idea that some districts are now establishing bus stop policies. And if you could refresh my memory and bring this information to our
This is
new
a
committee here
demonstration
about
of
why a bus
Wirecast.
stop policy might be something we'd want to consider, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, so the purpose of a bus stops policy generally, and it comes into play particularly at the beginning of the school year, when school is getting off to a start, and members of the community or parents, they want to request a change, they think their students on the bus for too long, they would suggest the bus come down a cul-de-sac. Any of those types of requests that school board members frequently get, there's never
This
really
is
a
a
place for the
demonstration of
administration to point
Wirecast.
to that sets the guidelines for how bus stops are established, what routes the buses follow, how changes are impacted to the schedule. So the bus stops policy just provides the opportunity to do that if the board is interested in it. And so then when you receive those emails in August and September of every year, you have somewhere to point to that says, here are the rules that are in place.
And the transportation director, I imagine, would get some of those emails and phone calls too.
Correct.
I don't know if we've talked
This
to John
is a
Byrne
demonstration
about this
of
motion yet,
Wirecast.
Tony, and what his thoughts
We
are.
do, it's generally the schools that get the calls for the bus stops, and then we reroute them back to John. If they want changes or anything like that, they do have to write letters and everything else. So there are things that we could put into a procedure that would help with this process, especially looking at this AR.
So I guess the question is, that's the global understanding of why this policy is valuable. Do you believe, I don't know if you've had these
This is a
conversations with John
demonstration
and the
of
principals, Tony, but do
Wirecast.
you believe that that would be helpful based on, I mean, I think you would know as boots on the ground better than us as policy members. It sounds good, but do you think that that's something that would be useful?
Honestly, I mean, I would like to take that to the principals' meeting and actually get more feedback from them, and make sure to see what's covered in the transportation versus the bus stops and all that information in the AR, before I would say to commit to developing a new policy at this time.
Okay, and Ed, is it your sense, having looked closely at our
This is
policy,
a demonstration
transportation
of
policy and AR,
Wirecast.
that anything going into the bus stops policy would more likely come from the AR or our policy based on our content? What do you think? Would it?
Sure, so if the board decided and the committee decided at a later time to adopt the bus stop policy, I don't think the transportation policy would need
Okay.
to come back. There might need to be some changes to the AR to take out some duplicate language, but not the policy.
Okay, so can we make a request just so that we keep current with our business?
This is a
that by
demonstration
the
of
next
Wirecast.
meeting, perhaps Tony, in your administrative remarks, you can let us know if the bus stops policy is something that you've gotten feedback on one way or another, what the feedback is. Is that enough time to get that by our March meeting?
Yes, because I can speak with John and then I have principals meeting
Okay.
to speak with the elementary
So
principals.
let's get an update on that if that's okay for the March meeting, and then that won't be something left hanging for us. All right, great. So we feel good. We're going to, I guess, commit committee, do you feel
This
that
is a
based on what we
demonstration of
discussed today, we
Wirecast.
can move this policy forward for first read at the end of the month?
Yeah, assuming that, I mean, I'm fine with it, assuming the things that we discussed, incorporating it into it are incorporated. Yes,
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
Okay, and perhaps, I don't know if this is orthodox or not, but given that we've made some changes, rather than waiting till when we typically get board documents for a business meeting the Friday before, is it possible to get an updated version for what we're going to approve to
This
this
is a
committee
demonstration
prior to
of
Friday, that
Wirecast.
Friday before? Just the committee?
Yes,
just
I
the
will work
committee.
with Ed to get that completed and over to you.
Yeah, so maybe we get it Monday, and we have a few days to look it over before it goes out to the full
Mhm.
board and is posted on that Friday. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Alrighty, so, that was good. That was a lot of stuff. We're now ready to move on to policy 251, which is homeless students. And again, like I said, this is a multi-page policy that
This
has
is
the
a
potential
demonstration
of
of
also being
Wirecast.
broken into a shorter policy and configuring an administrative regulation to go into it, which we currently have not presented. So, is there anything else before we get some feedback on this policy you'd like to mention, Tony?
Two things I just want to mention. As indicated, you see unaccompanied youth is now pulled from the policy. It was under my impression we needed to include that in all areas. We do not. We just have to have it defined within the policy itself. Also, if you look at page 3 of
This
7,
is a
we
demonstration
moved
of
one of the best
Wirecast.
interest determinants to, it was number 3, it's now a single paragraph at the end of the, that component of the policy. It starts with, if after such consideration, the district determines that it is not the student's best interest.
Okay, let's just make sure everybody finds it.
Sure.
because,
Page 3 of 7.
Page 3 of.
On the red line, I'm sorry,
On the red line,
on the red line.
okay. So everybody caught up with that? The best interest determination, which
This
is in
is
the
a
middle
demonstration
of the
of
page, of the
Wirecast.
red line version of the homeless students policy, page 3.
As I said, that was originally number 3 of the determinants, but it was better decided that it was actually an outcome. So it was placed as a paragraph following the best interest.
Okay.
Is it the same as the blue lines?
Yes.
Just clarify.
If you're looking at
So-
today's materials, the ones that were given out today, they're blue, but what we got over the
Oh.
weekend was red.
Got it. I'm just
Blue
trying to
lines.
make sure that we're on
Yes.
the same page here.
Yep.
Tomorrow it's gonna be purple.
Yes, because
This
it's
is
purple
a
one for small.
demonstration
And
of
then
Wirecast.
on page 4 of 7,
Red line or clean?
red line
Blue line.
version, blue line,
Okay.
the dispute resolution process
Uh-huh.
was also added as part of the policy, and this helps to put in procedures that are developed by the Pennsylvania Department of Ed.
Okay. All right, so one of the things before we go around to the rest of the committee, I'm gonna ask before we move on from this item, is that we're gonna caucus
This is
here
a
about whether or not we
demonstration
wanna
of
split this into two
Wirecast.
things. And Ed, maybe you can give us a sense of where policy would begin and administrative regulation would end, so we can decide if we wanna go that route. But in the meantime, Susan, you wanna kick off some feedback on this policy?
Yeah, so, a couple of things. There's a number of places where, since we're defining homeless student, I think we should capitalize it, but that's not really that's just grammar. On page,
Well, wait, but when you make a
This is a
suggestion like that, let's
demonstration
not
of
leave it
Wirecast.
ambiguous.
so
Let's
in
make
the
a
authority
determination,
and
yes
in
or
the
no.
purpose, in the authority and purpose, should homeless student be capitalized since we define it?
I think what we decided on this is that when we define homeless student, we actually just want to not capitalize the S in student. And then leave it lowercase throughout the policy.
So capitalize homeless but not student?
Correct.
Okay,
And on the clean version of this document, that change is reflected.
This is
but
a
I did
demonstration of
notice it was
Wirecast.
not in the
so
red.
in the definition, it's not. It's defined with a capital S.
Are you looking at the red line version?
Or the blue
Yes,
line.
the one I got yesterday.
Yes. So if you go to the clean version.
Why would the clean version be different from the red line?
No. It's not, so I have to go back. So right there, so it is in the definition,
Okay.
homeless students, but up here it's not, like
Okay.
the other areas. So I will go back, I'll capitalize the H in.
This is
for
a
the homeless.
demonstration of Wirecast.
Right, but the word student is capitalized in the definition, and now I'm hearing Ed saying we're not gonna capitalize it.
No, I just think that you don't have to capitalize the H in homeless. In the definition section, homeless students, the H will be capitalized, the S will be lowercase.
The low, yes.
In the definition.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so on page 2.
The red lines.
Red line version, I'm sorry. I still don't understand the distinction. So an
This is a
unaccompanied,
demonstration of
why are we calling it an
Wirecast.
unaccompanied homeless youth? Why isn't it an unaccompanied homeless student? Those who are experiencing, are youths who are experiencing homelessness while not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. What's the distinction here?
Between youth and child,
No, between homeless youth and a homeless student.
there's no difference between homeless youth and homeless child. Those are just, the term youth is the term that's used in the,
But is,
McKinney-Vento.
is a homeless youth different
This
from a
is a
homeless student?
demonstration of
It does that
Wirecast.
because they might not be a student at the time.
Okay. But what do we do with a homeless youth who's not one of our who's not a student?
We need to make sure they're being educated.
We need to identify them.
We need to identify that.
Okay, we need to identify
We
them.
need to
Okay,
identify.
fine. All right, on page 3 of 7, in the sentence where we're talking about best interest of the student, it's the first paragraph. It says parents and guardians,
This
it's
is a
the second or
demonstration
third
of
sentence.
Wirecast.
Parents and guardians of a homeless student may request enrollment in the school in the attendance area where the student is actually living or other schools. Does that mean or another school in our district? Is that what we really mean to say there?
That's a protection that's afforded under McKinney-Vento to a homeless student, that they don't necessarily need to request admission to the school in the zone where they're currently residing.
I know that, but if we're going to be responsible for a
This
homeless
is a
student,
demonstration of Wirecast.
is it in the attendance area where the student is actually living? That I understand. Or other schools, that still means other schools in our district.
Correct.
So do you wanna just add the
Or
words?
another district school.
So you can just add the words,
Or
or
is
other
it a-
schools
Yeah,
within the
under-
district, right?
So I want to be really clear, because in Radnor Township, we only have one middle school and one high school. If we identify a homeless student, and they're living in Radnor, but they want to go to another school in another town,
This is a
are we
demonstration
responsible to
of
get them there,
Wirecast.
or to arrange for them to be enrolled in that school? That's why I'm wondering, under McKinney-Vento, where it says other schools, it could mean another district. That's what I'm trying to clarify and ask.
When you have a homeless student, their entitlement to go to school is either in their school district of origin, the school where they came from, or a school in the district where they're homeless. Where they're
Okay,
residing.
so then that would say where the student is actually living, or another district school. Capital D, our district, another
This is a
school in the
demonstration
district.
of Wirecast.
Yes? Because I did read that as
Yes.
other schools. So, or,
Well, wait a minute, Susan, now I'm confused, because if a homeless student, may request enrollment in the school in the attendance area where the student is actually living, and let's say that's in Radnor, or other schools where, outside of the district?
no, that's what they're saying, that's what I'm clarifying. So if you're an
Well,
else,
their
This is a
district of
demonstration
origin,
of
you know, there's
Wirecast.
two distinctions.
Oh, I
So
see.
their district of origin that they were in, when they become homeless, maybe they're living with another family or something now in Radnor. So it'd be that question of that, or pick any district, the district where they're technically become homeless, they have that option, or district of origin where they were attending previously before the homelessness.
So does it make sense then
Does that
to
clarify?
say, in the attendance area where the student is actually living, or in the area of origin?
This is a demonstration of
does that then
Wirecast.
accurately?
It doesn't completely capture it, because
Okay.
if a homeless student, let's say, is homeless in the Ithan attendance area, and
Okay,
they came and they wanted to go to Wayne,
okay,
there's a procedure that, under McKinney-Vento, would allow them to seek admission to Wayne.
and if they had been living in Haverford Township and became homeless and moved to Radnor Township and wanted to continue to go to school in Haverford Township,
This
they're
is a
protected under
demonstration of
McKinney-Vento, except they'd be
Wirecast.
protected under McKinney-Vento through Haverford Township School District, not Radnor, so we wouldn't necessarily know about them.
Or there would be a best interest determination at some point, which is as you continue on in the document. That's the
Yeah,
next
but
section.
again, best interest, if I walk back into Haverford Township School District and say, I was here, I'm homeless now, I'm living over in Radnor, but I wanna continue to go to school here in Haverford, Haverford takes them.
Correct.
Cause under McKinney-Vento, they're entitled to do that.
This is a demonstration
Correct. The
of
time unit here
Wirecast.
is that if Haverford wanted to work with Radnor on transportation, and many times the
But that's not a best determination thing, that's under the transportation about how it gets paid for.
Correct.
But in
Okay.
the interest of clarifying what I think I'm hearing is the confusion, would, the question that is, the part that's confusing is where the parents, where the student could actually, his student's parents could actually request enrollment. So they could request enrollment in the school in the attendance area.
This is
where
a
the student's
demonstration
living,
of
or when we
Wirecast.
talk about other schools, the options are other schools within the district or that student's district of origin. Is that true? The parents, guardians could request that? Because I'm trying to just make, it sounds like the other schools is vague, is too ambiguous. So could it be more specific as to what the options would be?
Sure.
Would that answer your question, Susan?
Yeah, that is exactly my question.
Okay.
It is vague, but I don't know, and I don't know why it's vague, other than I can tell from the
This
black
is a
line, this is old
demonstration
PSBA
of
language.
Wirecast.
Right, so is that something that could be,
We'll go look at it and we'll bring that back.
Thank you,
Okay.
you're gonna clarify that. All right,
let's see, where were we? Susan, you're still?
right, so under the best interest determination, back to the whole unaccompanied youth, what is the best interest determination, if there's no parent or guardian involved? Because I thought I read here.
This is a demonstration
Yeah,
of
both of these
Wirecast.
best interest determinations presume that there's a parent or guardian, but if you have an unaccompanied youth, which is defined as a homeless student without a parent or guardian, so how's the best interest determination made then?
So if you go and look at a section on enrollment.
Where's that? Many pages later, all right, hang on. No, I don't.
This is a demonstration
Oh,
of
enrollment, please, you know what
Wirecast.
it is, the very bottom of 7.
Page 2 or 7.
Yep, yeah.
One of my comments here for tonight was the last sentence in this paragraph. Currently it reads, in the case of a homeless student, the district liaison will consider, you see that sentence?
Yes.
That sentence should read,
In the case of an unaccompanied,
yes.
not homeless.
Yeah, it should
Homeless
say, in
student
the
means
case
there's
of
a
an
parent.
unaccompanied homeless youth, the district
Thank
liaison
you.
will consider the views, and
Be-
that's where it's coming, so.
Because
This is a
because
demonstration
a
of
homeless student has a parent or
Wirecast.
guardian, the unaccompanied one does not.
Correct.
So,
Susan, can you just
yeah,
show me again?
right
where-
here, it should say unaccompanied, it should say unaccompanied homeless youth.
Correct.
Student.
No, not,
Youth, you're
youth,
right,
because that's what we used
Right,
in the beginning
right.
of the policy. Okay, got it. So, that was one question. All right, if parents and students disagree, I guess the district still determines it.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Red line for that.
No, that was a question about if the parent and the student disagree, the district still has to make a determination, and that's what that paragraph after best determination is about. Correct?
Yes, because that's where that,
No.
last sentence, isn't that what you're talking, because that speaks to a dispute between the parents and the.
No, I'm talking about when the parent and the student disagree on where the kid is to go to school.
In that case, the parents' desire would control.
See, I would have,
This
the way I'm
is a
reading best interest
demonstration of
determination,
Wirecast.
you consider all sorts of factors, and the district could overrule the parents.
It's one factor in the best.
Yeah, that's
interest
exactly my point, so
determination.
that's how a parent-student disagreement is settled, is that the district ultimately makes that determination, taking into account various
Correct.
factors.
Correct.
Okay, so that answered that question about that.
Is that clear enough, you think?
It is for me, yep, it is clear. regard to
This is a demonstration
immunizations.
of Wirecast.
This is a side question, it's just below that, it's
Just
still
cite
on
the
page
page.
3.
Okay.
We get oral confirmation of the immunizations, but given the new law about immunizations, is it, Tony or Ed, is it provided for in our immunization policy about what happens to homeless students with regard to immunizations?
This one I actually know because I talked to Kevin about it.
Okay.
And you can correct me if I'm incorrect, but under the McKinney-Vento Act, their
This is a
immunizations would not be
demonstration of
required. Oral is
Wirecast.
perfectly fine. That's acceptable in what you share with the district where the child's going to school.
Okay, so
So
they don't have to
follow
conform.
the particular.
And does our immunization policy create that carve out?
So we'll find out.
We can check that. It may now be because of the new immunization law.
Yeah, I can't remember, we
I
just worked
wanna
on
look back at
immunization.
that, right.
Okay, so what I was gonna say,
This is a
let's see,
demonstration of
services,
Wirecast.
Largely, I think the rest of the policy belongs in an AR, and Amy, to answer your question, and those are the only questions I had, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Ed, Tony, you're good with all those comments?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew, do you have any comments on 251? Mrs. McMenamin, do you have any comments? Joanna? No? Okay, Mr. Madden? No. Okay, so then could we please, just have as we discussed,
This
tell us
is a
what
demonstration
this would
of
look like if we're
Wirecast.
split into a policy and an AR?
Sure. So,
Can I ask a question, Ed, before you start?
yes.
Kind of refresh my mind of what the purpose of an AR is.
Sure, so a policy, the best way to try to understand is policy says what to do, the AR says how to do it. And so.
Normally put in the AR that,
Turn
we
your
get
mic.
the microphone's
This
off?
is a
Yeah, you got it.
demonstration of Wirecast.
I know.
Here.
But anyway, so, and in the AR, the authority to change the AR is granted back to the administration. Correct.
Their administrative
So
regulations.
it's how they're going, we tell them this is the policy, and then you're coming back and saying, thank you, this is what, we know what you want, this is how we're gonna do it.
Correct.
And that's changeable by the administration.
Correct.
And Ed, we've talked about in the past here as
This
well.
is a
the concept
demonstration of
you know,
Wirecast.
policies often are more broad, and exactly to what you said, then the ARs will then give more details to then how to enact that policy. Is that also
Yes.
accurate as we move forward?
Correct.
I didn't mean to cut you off, I just wasn't.
Okay, it's,
So for the homeless students policy, we would likely retain the purpose, the authority, the definitions, and the delegation of responsibility, along with that first guideline about students not being discriminated against in
This
the
is a
policy.
demonstration of Wirecast.
More or less, the remaining guidelines would be transferred to the administrative regulation. Now, we may have instances where there may be one sentence, the introductory sentence, just like we saw in the transportation policy, where we need to lift a few individual sentences out of those later subcategories and put back in the policy. But conceptually, we would expect to see the majority of what's listed under number 5
This
guidelines.
is a demonstration of Wirecast.
So I largely agree there. I guess I would have said that, up until the comment about the immunizations, I would have thought a lot of that would need to stay in. So under enrollment placement, the stuff that's best interest determination, and the comment about immunizations, and then the rest of it in the AR. That I still think that
This is a demonstration of
to the
Wirecast.
extent feasible in accordance with the student's best interest, the homeless student shall continue to be enrolled in their school of origin, and that there's a best determination, and that here's the deal about immunizations.
Okay.
And then beyond that, most of it, it looks like very much AR stuff to me personally.
Okay.
okay, so I'm just looking at my calendar. So our business meeting is on the 27th of February, right? So
This is a
we're hoping
demonstration
that
of
we can, since we
Wirecast.
get materials on Friday, the 23rd, if we all agree this, we'd like to see this go to a first read. I think it's in the shape that it can. Does everybody agree, once those things are changed? So could we shoot for Monday, the 19th, to have these materials back to the committee? And I think at this point, still red lines, still the policy and the AR, only because we're splitting them. And we've made changes back and forth. So
This
normally
is
we
a
don't ask for the
demonstration
ARs,
of
but in this case, because
Wirecast.
we're splitting policies into policies and ARs, and we've had comments about both. If we can get all those materials back to the committee by the 19th to review, so that it'll go off for posting on the following Friday without a hitch. How's that sound?
Okay.
And everybody here will read quickly and we'll get back to,
Great.
okay.
I just have a question. This would be just a clarifying question for me. And this goes back to the past. So on page
This is
6
a
and 7,
demonstration
we have
of
training.
Wirecast.
Now, is that the district liaison shall participate in professional? Is that something that the administration, or is that coming from somebody?
This is coming from the new laws that were put in place.
So you do not have the ability to change that?
That a training occur, or
Yeah,
that?
the training piece.
No, it has to occur.
So I guess my question would be is that if that's coming from a policy or a law that's coming down from the
This
state,
is a
why would it
demonstration
be
of
in
Wirecast.
an AR? There's no opportunity for a change. See, this is what I'm struggling with, because in the past, we would only have things that the administrators have the ability to move on without coming to us.
But then that's why.
Sure, so this is one of the examples.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
One of the
okay,
examples
okay.
where
One
a
is
sentence
okay.
would be listed.
So you're going to go back and see which ones are
Sorry.
under
Yeah.
law and, okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Now I understand.
And
Thank you.
maybe, since there are some variables here that haven't been determined, they require like a look-see, an immunization policy,
This is a
whatever.
demonstration
What's
of
helpful, I think, it
Wirecast.
saves the back and forth and wear and tear on you guys. Can you add like a little narrative summary to the changes you're making, saying, we could do this, we couldn't do that kind of thing? And that will save, I think, the questions, extra questions coming to you. Does that sound okay? All right,
Now,
terrific.
the other thing I heard about, it's telling you a little longer to complete the things that are impossible. Is that true?
This is a
Timeline.
demonstration of
Timeline. Yes, thank you.
Wirecast.
Going to the last item on the agenda. Tony, you can walk us through, please, the updated draft Booster Club policy timeline. And it's technically a draft today, but if everything goes fine here, it will no longer be a draft, it will be the operational timeline for the policy development, even though it's subject to change through natural course of events. It
This
won't be a
is a
draft anymore.
demonstration of
Correct. We've added
Wirecast.
that statement to the front slide of this presentation, that the timeline is subject to change. After having discussions with both Mr. Michael Petiti and Mr. Dan Bechtel from the high school and Mr. Friel from the high school, the athletic director, we did discuss the timeline, and we do feel as though, as going through, that we could meet the deadlines, but we do want to leave it open that we have the opportunity to make revisions as necessary, so we go through this process in a thoughtful manner.
This is a
So again, the
demonstration of
introduction of the
Wirecast.
Booster Club and the purpose did not change in this revised copy. But the timeline from the last time that you saw this at last month's meeting, there was a combination of like January, February, and information that was going to be done over those 2 months. What we did was just break it out so that we have more detailed information under each month. So we have some more specific deadlines. So the January, the author of a timeline for the development, which we're looking at, the presentation of the timeline developed.
This is a
Obviously, we're looking
demonstration
at the
of
February meeting
Wirecast.
now. Working in collaboration with Mr. Petiti and Dan Bechtel to establish the communications plan that will go along with this. We will be presenting that, whether it be the March or the April meeting, will depend on setting all that information up so we are clear in who we're presenting to, when we're presenting, and what documents will be available when. We will be gathering, and what we have been doing already, gathering the review of other local district boosters booster policies.
This is a demonstration of
Along with Mr.
Wirecast.
Bechtel and Mr. Friel, they will be scheduling a meeting with the booster clubs at the high school so that they can be aware of the changes that are forthcoming and the development of this policy. And in March, the communication plan will be presented. Again, that may be April based on the information that we need to include within that communication plan. We're going to be looking at the current existing RTSD policies and in regards to the cross-referencing and the impact it may have on them based on this new policy. Obviously, work with Mr. Diosio to assure compliance and accept any additional feedback that we need to include. And April would be the first presentation of the booster policy, the draft of that policy. This will just be for initial discussion and feedback. It would not be in the intent to move it forward for a first read during that month. It would be more just, here's the first draft of it, let's get some feedback, let's have some discussion so we know the direction we're going.
This is a
And with that, we would take
demonstration
it
of
back for revision.
Wirecast.
Again, look at it so we can bring it back to the May business meeting and look to bring it to the regular business meeting in May for a first read. Continuing on with June, looking at making any necessary revisions in preparation for a second read at the regular business meeting, and then providing a policy brief that will assist in reporting out the details of that adopted policy. Over the summer, we would share this with administrators, the final
Wirecast.
version that was adopted, along with the district booster clubs, and develop any potential administrative regulations if required.
Great, thank you. And did you want to show us the website?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you go to the website under community, there is a tab now for booster clubs. That will take you to the initial page that has a brief welcome
This
and
is a
listing the clubs that
demonstration of
host a
Wirecast.
booster club. Under this, you will see booster club policy development. This is the page where we will be keeping all the information in regards to the purpose of our development of this policy, the timeline, and any other pertinent information that was necessary to share with the community. We want to make this a transparent process so that people are aware of how the development is coming along and understand the policy as it's being put into place.
Right, and if you could just, keep it right there for a second. I wanted to also
This is a
mention,
demonstration
I think
of
this was
Wirecast.
come up with Michael, that there'll be multiple ways to land on this page.
Sure,
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. From the district homepage, again, this is directly from the community standpoint and looking at booster clubs. But when you go to
Well, from that other-
high school, and if you go to athletics, and right down under the B's, you will find booster clubs. And again, that will land you to this page.
This is a
We
demonstration
have
of
There's another place on the
Wirecast.
district homepage too, that under parents and students, that it might take you there as well. Under athletics and clubs, that might redirect to it also ultimately. But basically, the bottom line is that trying to make sure that it's easy for people to get the information. So you could actually start on a few different locations that will land you on the main booster policy page, policy development timeline page. Okay? So thank you very much for
This
that.
is a
Is there
demonstration
anybody
of
on the committee
Wirecast.
who has any feedback on what the game plan is as it stands right now?
Quick question.
Okay.
On your timeline, Tony, when are you reaching out to Michelle in the business office to just get feedback on whether or not, any component of this is gonna have a financial governance or, link it to, Title IX stuff? I didn't see that on the timeline.
As we're working through the cross-referencing, I'm going to be in touch with all aspects of central administration
Okay,
to make
great,
sure.
thanks.
And Tony
This
is
is a
talking to
demonstration
Dan
of
and Michael.
Wirecast.
Right.
It's a multi-pronged effort between communication, policy, and high school administration.
Correct.
So they're gonna be working closely together over the next several months. Okay. So with that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I know we're gonna have public comment, no
I just
worries.
wanted to make sure.
No
I saw
worries,
someone out
no
there.
worries. There's new business too. I don't know if anybody has new business.
Nope.
But assuming that they don't, we'll go to public comment. But I just wanted to say that we had a lot of very territory to cover.
This
And
is a
want to thank
demonstration
everybody for
of
helping make that
Wirecast.
happen, because we have 2 policies that will be going for a first read at the end of the month, and we have a confirmed action plan for the development of our Booster Club policy, so that's good. And with that, let's have, Chuck has new business, forgive me.
I do have new business. Actually, we had a conversation about developing the rubrics for the field trips, and that may be something that could be covered in an AR. And I just wanted to throw that out to the committee rather than doing policy.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
That would be something that I would
Rubrics for the field trips, what do you mean?
how it relates to the curriculum. We do all this already.
Wouldn't that be a curriculum thing?
Policy, there's a policy on field trips.
Oh.
I would like to see an AR on field trip that relates to policy. We
Got
have
it.
policy on field trips.
No, I know that.
And I didn't want to try to go through policy and all this. I mean, we can go wherever you want to go with it. I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion that it might be something that you may want to think about.
This is a
If you think
demonstration
that
of
if it's someplace else,
Wirecast.
that would be fine. I think it's pretty good policy. Then I've done my work.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Public comment, do we have any closing public comments?
Absolutely.
No?
One quick thought?
Yes.
Do I have to
that's
come up or can I?
Come on up.
Yeah.
Let's get your face on camera, come
We
on
need
up.
mic'd and everything.
Just at the Jerry Springer show. Not a portable mic to go on.
One quick thought, in the description of where you can find information on booster clubs.
This is a
Community
demonstration
for
of
school community,
Wirecast.
And then it's athletics. Well, there's one big booster club that's entered into a lot of discussion these last couple of months. And it's not athletics. So I'm thinking of the PAPA, the theater.
She wants
booster
to
club.
know if booster clubs could also be under the activities page of the,
In other words, and
I'll make that.
adding, I'm only thinking they're all the
Yeah,
booster
no,
clubs.
activities
they-
and
I know
athletics.
probably the majority of them are, but having the discussion on other booster clubs that made me think about
Yeah, the
that.
band.
I will let Mr. Petiti know.
Yes, thank
He'll
you.
love-
This is a
don't tell him I
demonstration
suggested
of
it.
All right, thanks,
Wirecast.
okay, thank you very much, and that concludes the policy meeting for today.
Thank you.
thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Very
We're,
well.
we're hanging out, is there food left? Because we got, maybe we should work in the,
I'll be right.
And Ed, it's good to see you.
How you doing?
Haven't seen you in a while.
How you doing? Yeah, good.
Good to have you back.
Yes, me too.